In today's session, we'll be talking about the page object model and why you should consider using it in your automated tests. My name is Hammid Funsho. I'm an automated test engineer with Coveros. And in today's examples, I'll be using the Selenified Testing Framework. Selenified is an open source testing framework which wraps the existing Selenium features and provides you with additional functionality to facilitate writing automated tests. For more information about Selenified, please see the link on your screen. The page object model is a design pattern that's often used for designing automation frameworks. It is the product of applying the principles of object-oriented programming into test automation. The idea behind it is that for every page or section of your application, you create a corresponding class. This class contains methods that map directly to all the actions that can be taken on that specific page. And so what you end up with is you have individual classes which represent the functionality of your application. And what this allows you to do is to create an application-specific API, which then enables you to write your tests by calling these methods, as opposed to having to manipulate HTML elements directly with Selenium or whatever test tool you're using. So for example, in this page, we can see that we have a login page. And what we've done is to represent this login page with a login class. And what that means is that for all the actions that a user can take on the login page, we have a method for it in the login class. And so if you need to write a test for this page, you just need to create an object of the login page, and all the methods that we've written are available to you to perform these actions. And so these include things like typing a username, typing a password, performing the login, or even just performing a reset. All these are contained in this class, and so as far as your tests go, you just need to know exactly what these methods are, and you can write tests for that application. Now, there are many benefits to using the page object model. The first is that our tests are just easier to write. So what we're looking at is a Google search that's been written with Selenium. The code on the left represents what happens when we write that test using a page object model framework. And the one on the right represents what happens when we use the native Selenium syntax to write the test. As you can see, the test on the left is a lot shorter and it's a lot easier to understand, right? Anyone can take a look at this code and figure out exactly what it's doing. And so you could potentially have more people on your team actually writing tests without having really any direct knowledge of Selenium or how it works. They just need to know this application-specific syntax that you've created for your test application, and they can write tests with it. Additionally, because of the fact that we are writing our tests by implementing this reusable methods, we're also putting steps in place to make sure that our test code is a lot easier to maintain, right? We know for a fact that our application will change, right? The HTML elements on a specific page might be switched out to something else. But because we've used these methods, we've reduced the amount of points in our code where we're actually manipulating this HTML elements directly. So what that means is that you could have a few hundred tests or a few dozen tests which are calling the same methods to perform some action on the page. And if the element changes, then you don't need to update every single one of those tests. You just need to update the method that these tests are calling, and all of the tests, all of the functionality that is related to that element will become updated, right? So we're making it easier for our application to be maintained, and we're making our tests less brittle. So now that we've seen some of the benefits of using the page object model, let's dive right into writing a few sample tests using the Selenified Testing Framework. As I mentioned earlier, Selenified extends the functionality of Selenium, and in its latest release, the 3.0 release, it has adopted a more object-oriented approach, which makes it a lot more compatible with using the page object model to write your tests. What this means specifically is that it now contains a new app object. Right? This app object contains all the methods that you need to perform both, actions on the page as well as verifications on the page. So really all you need to do is to create this app object, and you're able to drive your page and run tests on it. In the case of the page object model specifically, what you need to do is to build your pages using the app object as one of the constructors. And so that way, anytime you create an object of that page, an instance of that page, it contains this app object and all the methods that come with it. So here's an example of what that looks like. This is a sample page on one of our test applications. And in the case of this page, we're creating a class called main page, which is supposed to represent all the actions that can be taken on this page. And so what we've done is we've taken some of the individual GUI elements on this page, and we've created app objects out of them. And this allows us to perform the app object actions by simply calling those actions. Right? So if we look at this car list here, the car list on that page is a drop-down menu which contains a list of cars. Right? So what we've done is we've taken the ID for that component and created an app object out of it called car list. And what this car list element allows us to do is to write a very simple reusable method called select car, which, as you can guess, simply selects a car from the drop-down menu. All right. In this case, select, which we see here, is one of the native methods that's provided by the app object. All right. So instead of performing a select the traditional way with Selenium, you simply call this one-word method and feed it an argument of whatever vehicle it is, in this case, that you want to select from a drop-down. And we're doing the same thing in the next method, which is the assert. And this is simply making sure that when we select a specific car from a drop down, that it is what we expect it to be, right? So here's what that looks like when we write a test using these methods. As you can see, what we needed to do first was to create an object of this main page, and then we can run our select car method on there. Right? In this case, we're selecting a car called Volvo, and then in the next line, we're doing an assert to make sure that our selection is correct. And so we see very clearly here the benefits of using both the page object model as well as Selenified to write your tests. So we'll see another example of this in this test. In this case, we're writing a test to perform a simple Google search for our chosen term. And one of the first things I've done is to create a page object for this Google page, right? And we know that the Google page really only has one element, which is the search box. And so what I've done is I've created an app object using the Google search box. In this case, we're finding that element by its name, and the name is Q, and this is the Selenified syntax for performing the search and finding that element based on its name. And so we've given that a variable name called search box, and so we know that the search box is the GUI element on the Google page, which is the search box, right? And so what we can do with this is to write a reusable method to perform a search, right? So down here we have a method called search, which is pretty self-explanatory, and it takes an argument of search item, and all it does is when you feed this argument into this method, when you call it, it will search for the item. It'll type the text into the field and then hit the enter key, and it should perform the search. And down here we have another method that performs a verification of that, which is just checking to make sure that the text that we search for is what's in the search box. So here's what the test looks like. Again, much like we saw in the previous example, we are creating an object of this Google search page that we've created in the previous class, and this allows us to write tests by simply calling this method. So down here is our actual test. We are calling the search method on this term, and we are calling the assert method on that. And so what should happen when we run this test is it will navigate to the Google page, perform the search, and then check to make sure that the term is correct. We also have a bit of a wait in here. It does run pretty quickly, so I wanted it to wait for a couple of seconds so that you can see what the test actually looks like. All right, so now we have that. I'll go ahead and kick this off and watch the execution. And so we see we're running this test with Maven, so we're seeing all the Maven steps and the dependencies being downloaded. In the next few seconds, we should see a browser launch. And here we go. Here's Firefox, there's a Google page and the search term, and then we have a wait in there for a few seconds, and that should close it shortly. All right, so that's what that looks like. This is what a page object test looks like. And this is what it looks like to run it with the Selenified Testing Framework. Thanks for watching. I certainly hope you found this useful. This was Hammid Funsho with Coveros. And to find out more information about Coveros and some of the services we offer, or just to find some more informative YouTube videos like this, feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel or go to www.coveros.com.